You are listening to Directions from a Spiritual Tour Guide podcast. I am your host, Shanel Scott. I'm a psychic medium and energy healer who has been supporting those on a spiritual journey for over a decade. I'm your tour guide into the world of the unknown, showing you that the magic of the universe is at your fingertips. I believe spirituality is simple and fun, and this podcast will make it easily accessible, giving you the real talk on all things divine and spiritual, helping you to step into the flow, manifesting your dreams because we all deserve to be living our best life. Are you ready for an adventure?
Hi, I'm High Vibe Heather, energetic coach and healer. I created this podcast to inspire you to connect more deeply with your own life. By seeing every set of circumstances you encounter from an energetic perspective, you can take agency and full creative licensing to make your life extraordinary. What are you waiting for? Let's go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the High Vibe Heather podcast. I'm here today with Shanel Scott, psychic medium, who's joining us from Canada. Shanel, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today, Heather. My name is Shanel. I'm a psychic medium and a healer. My business is from the heart and soul, and that's where I like to move from, always from the heart and soul.
That's beautiful. So, Shanel, how did you get into this work of being a psychic medium? Is this something that you always knew was present, or later in life did you come across it?
Yeah. So I've been psychic all my life. From a young child, I remember seeing things. Um, and I had an experience that, I saw a person in my doorway at night. I was trying to go to sleep. It was dark in my room and I was scared. And I honestly don't remember if it was my mom or my dad, but one of my parents were like, no, there's nobody here. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Just go to sleep. You're fine. There's nobody in the house. And for me, I was young. I probably was like 6 to 8 years old and I was done. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is scary. And I shut it off. And I think I've always been like intuitive and in tune, but not as much as I was previously during the time that I kind of turned it off. And then it was shortly after I had my first baby that I kind of went, okay, this is a world that I'm okay with now. And I want to explore this again and start to kind of like reintroduce myself to these skills and things that I had. And the universe, of course, obliges. They're always happy to turn it back on for you. And at that point, then it ramped up. And I really, I started to see things again. I started to feel things in a different way and just reconnected to my intuition in a way that I really didn't know how much I missed, kind of thing. So it was probably then. So my oldest is now 22, almost 23. So he was probably 2 or 3 years old when I kind of started back into it. Um, Somebody bought me a deck of oracle cards, and that kind of like really kind of spitfired things for me. And then I started reading books and taking trainings and working with other mentors. And it just kind of took off from there. And it's always interesting because our journey takes so many twists and turns, and we're never quite sure where things are leading us to. And we just keep following the path. And I think that's been a big part of my journey. I started out doing one thing, and what I was doing 14 years ago when I started reading professionally compared to now is so different. And I'm so grateful for the journey and all the lessons and the things I've learned along the way. So, yeah.
That's something I keep hearing is that they recognize these skills as a child, but then something happens where it scares them. And so then they kind of put it away, and then it comes back later in life when they're ready to work with it. And I've heard before that for children, the veil is still thin, where we are able to access more of that spiritual realm. Whereas once we are, I think, age 7, by that time, that part of our brain develops where our subconscious kind of takes the back seat and our more
Mhm.
conscious awareness comes online. And then we lose that access unless we are willing to stay with it. So that's so fascinating that that's something that I just keep hearing over and over, and that that was your experience too.
Yeah, and it's something that I've also, experienced a lot. One of the things for a brief period in my business, and it still happens from time to time, I get messages from parents that are like, my kid is intuitive. I don't know what to do. How do I fix this? How do I help them? Not fix it, but how do I help them? And I love those like messages because I'm like, let's do a session. Let's teach them something. I empower the parents to kind of know things so that they can be helpful. Because I do think that there was so many of us that our parents didn't know how to deal with it. Our parents didn't know what to say or that it was even happening. And I feel so blessed that my children didn't have that experience and that they were able to have a parent who, said crazy things to them and they were like, "Oh, I'm validated. I am really playing with this spirit kid." And my mom did cross them over to the other side because weren't supposed to be here anymore. Or, that was a soldier that just walked through our house. And they don't belong there. Residual, it was okay. They were just passing through. But there was that, it's beautiful to be able to encourage that in our children. And like I said, I think there's a generation, under us that is being encouraged to have these things and to have these experiences. And the parents that don't know are reaching out. And it's so beautiful to be a part of and to witness kind of thing.
Wow. Okay. So your kids also experience these psychic abilities where they're able to see and hear, feel things.
Yeah, mostly when they were little, like you said, the veil is so thin when they're little. They just came from the other side and they have such access to it. And I think, when they start into school and they start, hearing and seeing what other people are saying, they start to shut it down a little bit because we start to move into the societal stuff. But definitely my kids, when they were little, saw things, heard things. I don't know if they totally remember or that they make those connections, but I see it. And I still see it with my kids now that they're older. They just don't necessarily recognize it the way that, we would. And sometimes aren't quite ready to like own the skills that they have too.
Wow. Okay. That is wild. Because I have not experienced that myself. And so when
Yeah.
people talk about it, I'm just so fascinated. Like, what on earth would that be like? I do not know. And yet, I'm not saying that I'll never know because who knows? Who knows? But
Yeah.
that's so fascinating to me. Okay, so you said that your journey has taken some shifts and turns as you've evolved. How did you like when you decided that yes, I am ready to like step into this and go back? How, how did that begin compared to like what it is now? What was that journey like?
Oh wow. Um I was just hungry for anything and everything that I could get my hands on to learn and grow in the beginning. I barreled through books on spirituality, like so fast because I couldn't get the information fast enough from them. I was always curious and wanting to learn more. And in the beginning, because we're such a clean slate, we have this opportunity to kind of like dive in and navigate that and to play and explore. And I loved that. I was instantly attracted to crystals, which, I was as a kid too, like rocks, stones, all of that, which again, my kids have inherited. And when they were little, I always had pockets of stones that I was being gifted from the beach or the park or whatever. But then as I started to kind of move into it more and more, I realized that I could do readings and do psychic readings for people. And then shortly after that, I recognized that I was doing mediumship as well. And I just was really blessed to have some amazing colleagues at the beginning that were like, supportive and helpful. I really grew my mediumship skills by doing sessions like group readings with other mediums that took me under their wing and shared space with me to allow me to experience what they were doing and to grow. And I just, there's so many people in the beginning that I was so grateful for that just were willing to answer questions or, have me tag along and watch or even participate to be able to learn things. And then the more that I moved into it, the more I kind of would get like a calling. Like I really felt the urge to do Reiki training when I was pregnant with my second little one. And that was like this huge draw for me. What I didn't realize that it was spirit directing me towards medical intuition, which is something that I love doing. And Reiki was just kind of like the gateway through. And when I actually finally did a medical intuition course, because it took me a while to find something, one of the things for me that's always important, and it's something that I talk about a lot, is this piece of like finding our unique path. Everybody receives differently, everybody works differently. And we really have to like explore and discover the parts that work for us and the parts that don't. There's no like written in stone, this is the way we do something in the spiritual world because we're all so unique and different. So for me, I was always really particular about who I was taking trainings from and having to feel a connection to them and even a connection to the material. There was things that I was drawn to, like there was a period where I was really interested in body talk, which is just an energy healing modality, but I knew it wasn't one that resonated with me to learn because it was very map based. There was like a procedure for doing it and I'm like, "Oh, I don't work that way. That's not how I roll." But I was really interested in the meridian lines and the way that they were working with those. So I found someone that did it and they were happy to like talk to me about it and we, exchanged time and energy, which was beautiful. So there's this journey where like yeah, I started with Reiki. I had three different Reiki teachers even. My first one I didn't really love and then my second one I took from and she was fantastic, but she just stopped teaching. So then I had to find a third teacher who, I took multiple courses with and she was fantastic. But it's this journey. My medical intuition teacher, Lori Wilson, who I adore, she just kept coming across my path. Like somebody would be like, "Oh, do you know this lady?" And I had this session done, and I was like, "Oh, there's that name again, Lori Wilson." And then when I looked her up, I was like, "Oh, she teaches medical intuition. I clearly this is the lady that I'm meant to meet," kind of thing. So I've done quite a few courses with her as well, but medical intuition was just fascinating to me. And it's really fascinating what our bodies can tell us and how much information our bodies store.
Yeah, yeah, because everything that we experience, even though our conscious mind doesn't have the capacity to hold it, our subconscious takes
Yes.
all in,
Yeah,
all of it.
absolutely.
And if we
Yeah.
don't process it in some way, it kind of becomes this dam of like everything just building up, building up, building up, taking up a lot of energetic capacity from how I understand it anyway. So,
I agree with you completely there. There's definitely stuff that kind of gets stuck in there that it does. It acts like a block or a dam and the energy just doesn't flow with it. And sometimes it's tricky or challenging to kind of be like, where is this thing in the subconscious mind and how do I access it to clear it or heal it or acknowledge it even to be able to move it?
and then just the idea that it's not necessarily just stuff from this present lifetime, but
Oh, yes.
perhaps even past lives that we're carrying with us too.
Oh,
And
I
holy
so
crap.
much. So much comes from our past lives. I encountered past lives really early on. They show up in my readings. They definitely were showing up in my Reiki sessions. And then they showed up even more in my medical intuition sessions. So that is my latest certification is I did a past life regression training that uses a meditation style and I love it. And I love the way that we access the information because it's so different than kind of a lot of the traditional spiritual modalities. Because often we have a practitioner that's saying, "Well, here, I feel this in your body, and this was from a past life, and this is what's happened." But in past life regression, we take you there through the meditation, or hypnosis is the other way that it's done typically, and you experience it. And
Mhm.
it's so interesting the way and the information that you receive. When I did the training, of course, we practiced on each other. And I had past lives that I knew about that that affected this lifetime. And there was two of them that I got taken back to in the training. And it was incredible to experience them in that capacity, because it showed me so much more and gave me kind of like that little bit more that I had been looking for. Like, I know this is a block, but why is it such a huge block? And then it gave me like three more pieces that made it make so much more sense. And I was like, oh. So it's such a different experience to have, to be able to access that information yourself and to literally experience that lifetime and what it's sharing. And again, the subconscious mind, so beautiful as it is, will protect you. So it will never show you things that you're not meant to see or you're not ready to see. And it's really interesting how that works. And I experienced that, practicing on one of my girlfriends. And there was a lifetime where she just couldn't see that much. And then she had gone to Europe for a few months traveling around and had done a retreat where they had gone to Merlin's forest, and she had all these flashbacks come. And when she was telling me about them, I was like, this was your past life regression. Remember this thing? And she was like, oh my goodness. Yes. She just wasn't ready to have that full experience. It's like the past life regression experience kind of cracked open the door so that she went there. It like came flooding in and she was ready to see it at that point. So it's such a cool modality and so different.
Wow. Okay. So you do mediumship, which is working with people who have passed.
Yep.
You do medical intuition, which
Yep.
is understanding what's going on inside the physical body in order to help somebody heal from an
Yep.
energetic kind of level.
Physical, energetic, past life. That's the nice thing. Like,
Okay.
medical intuition has a lot of capacity. I always say, I am a channel. That's mediumship as a channel. Even intuition, we're being a channel, right? So in medical intuition, I'm a channel for the body, and I always say it's like I'm just the
Oh,
closed captioning. So your body is talking, and I'm giving you the closed captioning that goes along with it. But it can be mental, it can be emotional, it can be physical, and it can also be like your spiritual stuff. It can be past life, it can be generational trauma. Like, the body is endless in the information that it has to share. It is really wild.
wow. Wow. Okay. So at this moment now, with all of this like training that you've done and all these different areas that you've stepped into, what is your favorite way at the current moment to work with people?
That's a big question. So my favorite thing is actually working with people to find that block, that thing that's holding you back, to up level life. So I like to call it creating your fertile ground. It's like kind of doing that digging and letting those roots grow and finding that seed and that thing. I definitely have a knack for being able to find the root cause of a problem. And it's often trauma that we had. And I use the word trauma very lightly because sometimes it's not really, it's just an experience, I guess is a better word, that we had as a child that we've carried forward. And I love working with my clients kind of longer term, where they're coming back to me and we're exploring it and, in different ways. I've had people say, I think I need a past life regression. I'm like, all right, let's do past life regression and see how this all connects. And then they're given, a life or two lives that the same problem existed and how they moved through that, or being able to work on the mindset pieces around that thing that started. And uncovering the layers, because it's never just one layer of things, as we all know in the spiritual realm. It's like you peel back one and then you get another. So that's my favorite. And it really, like I said, takes on different. I do sometimes I have people that I work with as business intuition clients where we're working on their business and what's going on, but our business and our personal aren't disconnected. They're one and the same. So, we work on mindset, or again, going back to where this trauma was, and whether it's business or personal life or career or just your spiritual practice and wanting to grow that. Like for me, it's so humbling watch somebody like find those things and conquer them and just start to live more of the life that they've always dreamed of living, which is just like the most incredible thing to witness.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like it. What a powerful way to connect with people and help them move through life. And like you said, step into what they're really here to do,
Yes.
move
So
past
many
the block.
people get stuck and they think that their purpose has to be this grand thing. And sometimes we just recognize how the purpose is really internal, and the self-love and the taking care of ourselves and how that trickles out to other people is actually like our superpower. And it's not necessarily that we have to heal world hunger, or because people think purpose, oh, I have to do something big and grand, and it's like, no, it's not always that way. So yeah, it's so beautiful watching people have a spiritual awakening.
Yeah, yeah. So that whole idea of purpose, like people, I know myself in the past got so hung up on that, feeling like, oh, it's got to be some particular career that's going to give me meaning. And then as I studied human design, I part of the theory in that is that your purpose isn't what you are here to do, it's who you're here to be.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that so much because that's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's who you are.
And when I finally learned that, I was like, oh, it took so much pressure off.
Yes.
Like, I have to find this one thing. It was how I was seeing it. And I was like, no, it's not who I be in the world and how I move through life. And it more like will show you what it is in hindsight as you look back on all the choices that you made, the things that were calling to you, the things that you felt the urge to go out and learn and study and practice, like looking back, then you can see, oh, I was living out my purpose through following that trail. And I've also heard that your purpose is more even simply like just remembering who you are.
Yes. I think that's one of the things I talk about a lot is remembering that we were all source and that we were all light, and we were all, we all came here to have an experience. And yeah, remembering that piece of ourselves and remembering how to stand tall in it again and to be authentic in it, and to lose the mask or the persona that we sometimes carry to move through life, or to find that purpose in it. Yeah, I think you put it so beautifully with, it's who we are. It's how we move through it. And that hindsight piece of like, when we look back, we didn't realize that we were really doing the thing that we were meant to do.
Yeah.
The pressure piece of it, I think, is such a block for people, that we get into this, well, I have to do this thing, I have to know my purpose, I have to know the next step. And it's like the universe just says, oh, we don't have to anything, and we don't need to know the how of anything, we just have to get present. And that's piece of just being ourselves. It's about being present and being able to see what's being put before us.
Yeah. And to live into each moment, like,
Yes.
because it's not happening in the future, it's not happening in the past, it's happening right now. And when you can live in the moment, then that's like the unfolding of your story.
Yes.
Ugh, yeah, it's yeah, we just put so much pressure on ourselves to like, yeah, live these lives that we think we have to plan out, but there is no plan. There is just
Well, there's a grand plan,
there's
but
a
we don't
great
need to know what that plan
yeah,
is. The
but we
universe
aren't in
has
charge of
it.
it
No.
necessarily.
Yes, we just have to trust that the plan is unfolding exactly how it's meant to. I think it's always interesting when we have these moments of like, oh, that was lining up this, like my Reiki training, like Reiki was preparing me to be really good at medical intuition. So when I started to do medical intuition, I was like, oh, I know how to track energy in the body already. I do that through my Reiki practice. And even just experiences. I always tease, I met my husband 20 plus years ago in a wedding. His best friend where married one of my best friends from university, and we were both in the wedding party. And he gave the best man speech I've ever heard. And it was funny because I always talked about it. Like I always kind of raved about this speech that you were laughing and crying in every breath, and it was the best. And it really was so memorable. And 20 years later we're married, and we found each other again. Our friends actually sadly said we were both kind of like off the dating path for so long that maybe we should just date each other so we could practice. And we were like, all right, we'll go on a date with each other. We were both kind of like, oh, we're so over dating, and like, but we went on a date and that was history. We fell in love pretty quickly. And yeah. So, but again, who knew that the man at the wedding 20 years ago was going to be my husband one day? Um, it's kind of wild and crazy when we kind of go, oh, the universe was prepping us 20 years ago for this, and here we are, right? And I don't know that when we first met we would have actually been compatible. I was married at the time and had a toddler, but I knew I was headed for divorce very quickly. So I already kind of knew that was happening. But I think the experiences we had in the in between was what allowed us to come together and to be so strong together, because we had both experienced kind of relationships that were similar, and we had experienced kind of things that brought us together in kind of the wounds that we had and that needed to be healed, kind of thing. So it's always wild the things that the universe has in plan for us.
What a cool story.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Brings a lot of hope for people, I'm sure.
Right? But even that, we talk about the forcing, and I've seen it so many times with clients lately. This piece of like they're looking and looking and looking for someone, and the second they kind of go, okay, I give up and I'm done. And that's exactly where I was when I met my husband. I kind of was like, I was over the dating thing, and my girlfriend was like, just one date. He's such a sweet guy. Like, just go one date with him. And when we stop and we're just like, I'm done, and we kind of surrender and go, I'm going to move into the flow of it, somebody shows up. And I've seen it so much lately. It's kind of crazy how many times it's happened lately to people I know, like clients and friends. And when we learn to surrender, it's kind of a magical thing.
Yeah. It's almost as if that's how we're meant to live.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's a tough one too.
Right? But the surrender, I think, again, we go into the societal things of like society says that's waving the white flag and we're giving up. But the reality is what the universe is asking us in the surrender is to be present, which we talked about, and to just be. When we stop forcing and we start flowing, life gets so much easier. And until we find it, and and that's one of those beauty things with my clients. They're like, I think I found flow. And I'm like, okay, tell me about it. And they'll talk about it. And I'm like, yeah, you're so there. Keep going. And then they come back for their next session and they're like, oh, I thought I had found flow. I found it now. And I was like, now you found it. Like there's that look that you're like, oh, you found it now. There's this ease that you found, that when you stop fighting against things and you're really present, then you see things in a totally different way. And it just becomes like, it's so beautiful. Like it's so different and it's so beautiful. So, yeah.
Sounds very magical.
We should all live in the flow, right?
Right. It's so funny, the striving that I personally have done to be in the flow, which is kind of counterintuitive. It's kind of an oxymoron to strive to be in flow.
Yeah, but it's true. It's hard work. Like, it takes a lot to figure out how to not do work. And
Yeah.
you're right. It's counterintuitive, but when you figure it out, then you're like, "Oh, okay, now I can do the no work part or the surrender part." But it took a lot of work to get to that part. A lot of mindset shifting, right?
Yeah,
Because
I
we're not programmed that way. Society didn't program us that way, and it's about having to kind of unprogram ourselves and re-find a new way of doing things.
there's so many tools around like deconditioning, reprogramming.
Yeah.
Like that's really the biggest hurdle in life is unfucking your mind.
Absolutely, exactly. And I love what you do with human design because I think it's that piece of like understanding ourselves better to understand those places where we have those hiccups that, oh, this is like my weakness and I need to work around that or find a way to turn it into a strength or, just understanding that, I move from this center or this energy and because I do, I have to be careful when I get into these situations. And the more we kind of get present and know ourselves better, the more we get to expand and grow and flow and find that ease in our lives.
Yeah, wow. So I have always been fascinated with medical intuition. I don't know why I read Carolyn Miss's book, Anatomy of Spirit.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And that just like blew me away. And I was like, what? You can do this? People can do this? And so tell me about what that looks like when you're working with somebody and you're doing a medical intuitive session.
Yeah. For the most part, when I do medical intuition, I don't actually have somebody present with me.
Okay.
Um, A full body scan can take me anywhere from an hour and a half to 4 hours to actually scan the whole body. We typically don't scan an entire body. That was more training based. Every once in a blue moon, I have somebody that I need to go a little deeper and we kind of scan further. But often when people come to me, they're experiencing something and they want me to tap into that and to kind of find where that issue is. So still, I tend to do it without the physical body there. And I literally have to just connect to the energy of the body. So it's almost like when we think of frequency, everything has a frequency, a vibration. And so I connect to the frequency of that body. And when I know that I'm fully connected to it, then I allow it to start talking. And typically, like I said, because somebody's asking me about something specific, I will ask the body, like, this is what I've been asked to check on. Can you show me what I need to see? And the body will take me in and it'll show me where to start. And when I track, I don't tend to get like full sentences as much as I get words or like a couple of words to make sense of an energy. And it comes through in all sorts of different ways. Now, the one thing that's incredible about medical intuition is the body will talk in the language that you understand. So it's always interesting when I have somebody that has more of an anatomy base. I'll get different words than somebody that has no kind of anatomy background or a medical background. It'll bring in words that I'm like, okay, we're being technical today. And sometimes I have to get out my books. I have a few like reference books, and it'll be like, go to this page or open to this, and you'll find what you're looking for. So I'll open the page and kind of scan and be like, oh, that's what you're trying to tell me and I can write it, the right words. Cause I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me because the word is a word I don't know. Right. So it's beautiful. We just track the energy and then it'll do things like it'll be like, okay, pause, move into stillness for a moment. This is connected to, say, a past life. And then it'll take me on like a sidebar and it'll show me the past life, or it'll go along and it'll show me a past experience that created something. So for example, I had an ankle injury a couple years ago and had to have ankle surgery. But when I tapped into it, it kept showing me my first year of university. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts of Dance. And there was a day in class and I was super tired and I had jumped and I landed on the top of my foot instead of the bottom of my foot and I tore like all the ligaments in my ankle and foot and that. Nothing was broken, thank goodness, but it created damage that back then they didn't do ultrasound. They x-rayed it to just make sure that there was no breakage and that was it. So then when I had injured it, this is what I was being shown and I was like, okay, it'll make sense eventually. The surgeon went in and said, do you have tendonitis? Do you have chronic pain? I'm like, no. He's like, well, your tendon was like string cheese. It was like shredded and all coming apart. And I was like, oh, I said, oh, I know exactly what that's from. And it took me back. So it's so interesting how the body just knows these things and it will take us sometimes too. It's like an imbalance that's happening in the body. When you're complaining about a sore shoulder, but the reality is that your shoes are worn unevenly or you have an ankle thing that's going on, and just because you're walking a little bit funny, it trickles all the way up to the shoulder. So it'll track the energy through the body too, which is so interesting. So there's never like they're never the same twice, which is always, I love that piece of it. But it really is about just tracking the energy and allowing the body to speak clearly. We're not interpreting the information. Even if I get something that sounds like a sentence or a diagnosis, it goes into quotes and we source who's saying it. Is the body saying this? Is the mind saying this? Is a doctor saying this? Oh, it's actually your best friend who thinks that this is what this is, right? Like, so it's always so interesting how the body determines those things. It shows me when it's like a different energy that's coming in and it needs to be acknowledged. It's so fascinating. And Carolyn Miss was where I started too. And she is it. And but again, she teaches a very map-based medical intuition, which I wasn't drawn to. Hence the reason I went to Lori Wilson's version, which really resonated with me, and I'm so grateful. But yeah, when Carolyn Miss talks about all these things the body does, and you're like, what? And then when you have the pleasure of experiencing it, it's so incredible to like see what comes out and what the body has to share.
Yeah, I think the thing I love about it so much is that it goes back to the root cause.
Yes.
It's not about just like, oh, let's put a band-aid on this symptom. No, let's go back to what initially occurred that created the situation that you're now experiencing and heal it at that root level so that it's just gone. You don't have to keep living with it and trying to fix something that you're not going to fix with just a band-aid.
And that was my hiccup with Reiki, was that it felt like a band-aid in the beginning. When I did it how I was taught, it felt like a band-aid because I was getting all this intuitive messaging, the body talking, spirit talking, and I would end my session and then I would sit there and I would feel so terrible because I'd be spewing at the person all these things that came up. And I went, okay, this doesn't work for me anymore. Like I have to do this differently. So then I started to talk through my Reiki sessions. And, it was exactly that. Like if we're not actually getting to the root cause of the problem, then that's where we struggle. And I'm really grateful that is kind of my niche, is getting to that root problem, because when we understand where it starts from, then we can start to heal it. When we don't have that originality of it, that root of it, we are just again putting band-aids on trying to figure out what it is. But when we go, oh wait, this is the moment that it started, no, it doesn't necessarily give us the answers how to heal it, but it says, this is the information you need to start. This is the information that's going to take you someplace completely different than where you are.
Okay, so you do a session with someone, you get this piece of information, and then you present that information to the client, and then what? Then they like either seek medical help on that thing or what happens next?
It really depends on what comes up.
Okay.
Sometimes it is medical and they have to seek medical attention to continue, or sometimes people will come to me during their medical journey to just get clarity and validation. And the big part of it is there's always a spiritual component to that. The queen, Louise Hay, really started it. You can heal your life was huge in us
Love that.
recognizing these things. If you love Louise Hay, I definitely suggest check out Ina Segal. Her book is like Louise Hay's book times like 100. It's amazing. Um, she's an Australian healer, and same thing. She talks about all these connections of like, and I do it all the time. I'll crack open. I'll be like, oh, my left foot hurts, and you'll crack open Ina Segal's book, and you'll look it up, and you're like, oh yeah, well that makes total sense. I get it. So there is these components. I had an emergency appendectomy. Your appendix is representation of fear. And when I had that emergency appendectomy, I was at a point in my life where I was conquering a lot of my fears. Clearly, I didn't need fear in my body anymore, right? Like it's wild to see the things. So some people will deal medically. Some people will have somebody they work with energetically already, and they might go to their healer. They might come to me for some energy work or a session where we're working on like this is the root and how do we shift it. um that I think that's the beautiful thing, and I love to hold space for what's meant to be, and if I'm that person, fantastic, and if it's something else that's going to give you greater clarity, then please go do that thing. Like, I just love that we've unwrapped something that allows you to kind of dig deeper into whatever it is that you have to do. So, yeah, I present the information that I receive. It's always interesting to hear like the validation or, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. I did this. And then it's, having a conversation about like, where do you want to take this next? And how it best suit you to actually do the healing work that needs to happen to go with that kind of thing. So there's no single answer in spirituality. I don't think there's ever a single answer that come
Yeah.
along with it. So yeah,
Which I would imagine makes the work really exciting. It's like an adventure.
always, always. It's like when you were a kid and you got to do those pick adventure books, and you'd be like, oh, you can go to page 10 or you can go to page 15, and you're like, ooh, right? It Depending on how you want to work with you get a different experience, a different healing journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds kind of playful.
It is so, you know, I think people often have this misconception that when we get into healing work, it's always heavy. And oftentimes, when we can go back to that place, it's like this lightness of like, oh, that's the spot. This is where it started. And there's an excitement to, I can start my healing journey now. And, you know, I think that's the thing that I love when I meet other people like you who brings the joy and the excitement to spirituality. It doesn't have to be heavy and dark like so many people want to think of it as. It really is this beautiful thing that brings so much more light and joy and happiness and love and all the good stuff into our lives.
Yeah. And I can imagine for your clients that they just walk away with a peace of mind.
Yeah.
That, okay, now I have an answer that I can move forward with.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really a beautiful gift to give to people is peace of mind.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. So do you first, and I know this is kind of a silly question because you just don't know you're always evolving, but do you foresee you continuing down this path of medical intuition, or is there something else that you feel like is calling you next to explore?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I did the past life regression course, I kind of felt like, oh, I have my baskets full again, and this is where I'm meant to be. And it's always interesting just to kind of see how spirit guides you and connects you to like what the next piece is. Definitely the thing that I've been shown over the summer, and even that shown and then told to sit on my hands and not do anything yet, which I'm always like,
Oh.
really? Yeah. there was a need for an energy shift. And until the energy shifted, I knew I wasn't ready to start into the new project, and neither were they. But I've been shown this creating a program for creating your fertile ground, like really growing your fertile ground. It's definitely what I've done for a very long time. And it's interesting what they've shown me already about roots, like where is this stemming from? Where is this coming from? And just the modalities that we can use to kind of grow that fertile ground. And I love that it's something that I can offer that doesn't have to be done one on one, and that can be done as more of they're showing me more like a program so that somebody can work through it at their own time and their own pace. I was a single mom for a lot of years, so that's always something for me that is near and dear. Even now in the world that I work in, we don't necessarily always work the most normal hours. We can't always jump on to a training, in the evening because we're doing sessions or whatever. So having that flexibility for people of being able to do a recorded journey. So I've been shown a lot of healing energy, meditations, and practices people can do to kind of work with their own energy, their mindset. So it's always interesting. I know that I won't stop medical intuition or the healing journey that I take with people. But it's always just interesting how it evolves and how it moves. And I think even the past life regression training, the style that I was taught, I'm seeing how I can use that meditation technique to show people, doing medical intuition themselves, or mediumship, or, learning how to kind of tap into that past life piece. But it's just so interesting how we can take things and kind of tweak them and turn them into something that really works for us. And for me, it's always about empowering the people I work with to have tools and to be able to access the information themselves. I'm only one person and I can only do so much. So by giving people tools to be able to do work themselves, what's the saying about give a fish,
Oh,
teach
yeah.
a man to fish. You can give a man a fish or you can teach him to fish. And yeah, that the one that I just hacked, but yeah, that kind of thing. So yeah, medical intuition is near and dear to my heart. It is always going to be a part of my practice, but definitely I think evolving this growing your fertile ground is so important to me right now, to really empower people to live their dream lives and to let go of that stuff that we don't need to hold on to anymore. Healing that root right from the beginning.
That sounds really cool. So it sounds like you're being guided to make it more accessible to a larger
Absolutely.
number of people. Because,
Yes,
as a practitioner working one-on-one, your capacity really is limited,
it
especially since
is.
you have other work that you do to sustain yourself in the world. Like,
Exactly. Yes. Or just needing to have a life, a family,
yeah.
friends, and nature and all those things. We only have so many hours in the day. So to be able to have a little bit further reach is always a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Wow. So cool. I
Thank you.
really loved connecting with you and hearing about your journey and all the really awesome ways that you work with people and how you've grown in your own practice, continuing to follow it as it's evolved. That's just so exciting to me that we're just always on this journey of evolution and we are never done. We are never at a place where I've arrived, you know?
Yes, a million times over. Yes. We just keep arriving and arriving and arriving. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I
And
am,
we'll
oh,
expand as much as we'll allow it to.
yes. Yeah. I'm so grateful to have been able to connect with you today, Heather. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm so grateful. I love being able to talk about these things with others and to be able to share them outside of into the world of the podcast. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Absolutely. And if people are interested in learning more and want to connect with you, do you have any links you want to share? Any programs?
Yeah.
Anything? Like, how can they find you?
The best place to find me is on my website at fromtheheartandsoul.com.
Okay.
But also on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. You can find me at From the Heart and Soul. And I do have a podcast as well, and it's Directions from a Spiritual Tour Guide.
Oh, fun.
Spiritual tour guide, because we all need someone to guide us through this crazy life, right? So, yeah.
Fun. I will definitely link all of that in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe and leave a rating and review. And if you think a friend would also benefit from hearing this episode, please share. It will help me build my audience and keep the podcast going.